She was mocked just for speaking French too fluently. "You're a janitor, not a GPS." One manager laughed dismissively. Every time she walked by, people threw sideways glances. No one ever asked why she stayed silent. Until the day of the $80 million summit, when the entire interpretation system failed and she stood up, flawlessly speaking 3 languages in one breath. In that moment, the CEO realized her true identity was far more terrifying than anyone imagined. Elena Hartwell pushed her cleaning cart through the gleaming corridors of Linguaro International, her sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished marble. The New York headquarters was a fortress of glass and chrome, its walls lined with awards for global translation services. The air carried the sharp tang of espresso and printer ink, a world of high-stakes deals and whispered ambitions. Elena's janitor uniform was a faded navy, her brown hair tied back in a low ponytail, her face bare of makeup. At 28, she moved with quiet precision, her eyes catching the clutter of sticky notes and coffee rings left by hurried employees. Most barely noticed her, their voices loud with talk of contracts and travel. A linguist in a tailored blazer rushed past, muttering thanks without a glance. Elena nodded, her hands steady on the cart, but her fingers lingered on a smudged glass door, tracing a reflection that held more than her plain silhouette. "Hey, before we go deeper, can you do me a small favor? Grab your phone, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. It means a ton to share stories like this, and I'd love to know you're out there feeling this with me." Just a quick pause to connect, then we're right back in. In the tech room that morning, Elena was untangling a cable behind an interpretation mic, her hands deft despite the dim lighting. An engineer, a lanky guy with a Harvard hoodie and a frantic look, struggled with the setup, muttering about deadlines. "Here," Elena said, her voice soft as she adjusted the mic and gave instructions in flawless Parisian French. The engineer blinked, startled, but Claire, a senior translator with sleek blonde hair and a cashmere scarf, overheard and cackled. "Oh, honey," Claire said, her voice slicing through the room. "You sound like a GPS trying to be chic. Leave the accents to us pros." Her colleagues laughed, one snapping a photo, the flash glinting off Elena's glasses. Elena's hands paused, her face calm. She gave a faint smile, pushed her cart out, and let the door close behind her, Claire's laughter echoing like a blade. The lobby was bustling with employees darting between meetings. Elena was wiping down a reception desk when a group of analysts passed, their briefcases swinging. One, a guy with gelled hair and a flashy Rolex, leaned over. "Yo, cleaner," he said, pointing at a non-existent smudge. "You missed a spot." His friends chuckled, a woman in a pencil skirt adding, "Bet she's never seen a desk this fancy." Elena's glasses caught the light as she grabbed her rag, her movements slow and deliberate. She wiped the desk, her hands steady, and looked at the guy. "Your manners missed more," she said, her voice low but sharp. The group's laughter faltered, the Rolex guy's grin stiffening as Elena moved to the next task, her cart's wheels rattling softly. In the parking garage, Elena was collecting trash from the bins when a sales rep named Connor with a tailored blazer and a loud laugh pulled up in a shiny SUV. "Hey, trash lady," he called, tossing an empty energy drink can toward her cart, missing the bin. "Pick that up, will ya?" His colleague, a woman with a pearl necklace, giggled from the passenger seat. "Bet she's used to cleaning up after losers," she said, her voice carrying across the concrete. Elena's hands tightened on the bin's edge, her glasses slipping slightly. She picked up the can, dropped it into the bin, and looked at Connor. "Your aim's worse than your character," she said, her voice low. Connor's laugh stopped, his blazer suddenly tight as Elena resumed her work, her sneakers echoing in the garage. In the stairwell to the 4th floor, a project coordinator named Derek, with a tailored vest and a smug grin, brushed past Elena as she carried her cleaning supplies. "Watch it, janitor," he snapped deliberately, knocking her bucket, spilling soapy water onto her sneakers. "Those shoes look used to messes," he said, laughing as he continued up. A passing intern clutching a tablet giggled. "Bet she cleans her own trailer like that," she said, her voice echoing. Elena's hands clenched the mop handle, her glasses fogging slightly, but her face stayed calm. She mopped up the spill, her movements deliberate, and looked up at Derek's retreating back. "Spill less," next time, she said, her voice cutting through the stairwell. Derek's laugh faltered, and the intern's tablet slipped as Elena resumed her task, her tote bag swaying lightly. In the elevator to the 5th floor, a marketing exec named Rachel, with a designer handbag and a fake smile, glanced at Elena's uniform and sighed. "They let anyone in here now," she said to her colleague, a man with monogrammed cufflinks. "She looks like she's from a thrift store." The man laughed, his eyes flicking over Elena's sneakers. Bet she mops her own apartment like that, he added, his voice carrying. Elena stood still, her bucket at her feet, her face unchanged. As the doors opened, she looked at Rachel. Class isn't in your bag, she said, her tone even. Rachel's handbag slipped slightly, her smile gone as Elena stepped out, her tote bag bouncing lightly. At the reception desk, a security guard named Javier with a kind face and a worn badge slipped Elena a small embossed card as she passed. Found this in the old files, he said, his voice low. It was an invitation to a Middle Eastern cultural summit addressed to Elena Hartwell, diplomatic advisor. Elena's fingers paused, her eyes scanning the card, a flicker of pride in her posture. She nodded, slipping it into her uniform pocket. Thank you, she said, her voice soft but firm. Javier smiled, returning to his post, but a nearby receptionist overheard her eyes narrowing as she whispered to a colleague about the cleaner with a hidden history. In the cafeteria's storage closet, Elena was restocking cleaning supplies when a compliance officer named Meredith with a tight bun and a sharp tone poked her head in. You're taking up space, she snapped loud enough for nearby staff to hear. She shoved Elena's cart, knocking over a bottle of cleaner that splashed onto her uniform. Stick to the shadows, janitor, Meredith added, her colleague smirking. Elena's hands shook as she grabbed a rag, her glasses fogging. She wiped the spill, looked at Meredith and said, Your push doesn't move me. Meredith's bun tightened, her smirk fading as Elena resumed her task, the bottle's cap clicking back into place. By late morning, the office was alive with the arrival of a Middle Eastern delegation, their robes and briefcases commanding attention. Elena was emptying a trash bin in the cafeteria when she overheard two delegates at a nearby table, their Gulf region Arabic rapid and tense. This firm lacks cultural depth, one said, his voice low. We're walking away. Elena paused, her hands on the bin, and approached her uniform, stark against their elegance. If I may, she said in perfect Gulf Arabic, her tone calm, perhaps I can address your concerns. The delegates froze, their eyes wide. Where did you learn this? One asked. Elena pushed up her glasses, her ponytail swaying. I lived there for 8 years, she said, her voice steady. They nodded, their faces softening, and she walked away, her cart quiet. In the hallway outside the boardroom, Elena was sweeping when a junior translator named Jen with a sleek ponytail and a cruel edge leaned against a glass panel. Heard you impressed some guests, she sneered loud enough for passing staff to hear. She flicked a sticky note onto Elena's clean floor, laughing. Don't think you're special, janitor. Her colleagues smirked, one recording the moment. Elena's hands gripped the broom, her face calm. She swept the note into the bin, looked at Jen and said, Your trash speaks for you. Jen's ponytail flicked, her laugh fading as Elena resumed sweeping, her movements precise. A junior clerk named Priya, with a stack of files, handed Elena a small folded booklet in the mailroom as she sorted packages. This was in the archives, Priya said, her voice soft. It was a program from a UN linguistic conference listing Elena Hartwell as a keynote speaker on cross-cultural mediation. Elena's fingers brushed the booklet, her eyes softening, a quiet resolve in her stance. She nodded, slipping it into her pocket. Thank you, she said, her voice steady. Priya smiled, returning to her work, but a nearby intern overheard his pen pausing as he texted about the janitor with a diplomatic past. In the conference room's anteroom, Elena was vacuuming when a PR specialist named Gavin with a slicked-back haircut and a loud voice strode in. Cleaner, you're ruining the vibe, he said, his tone sharp. He unplugged her vacuum mid-use, the cord snapping back, and laughed. Go scrub toilets or something, he added, his colleagues chuckling. Elena's hands clenched the vacuum handle, her glasses catching the light. She plugged it back in her face, calm, and said, Your noise ruins more. Gavin's laugh stopped, his haircut suddenly flat as Elena resumed vacuuming, the hum filling the room. The boardroom prep was frantic with techs scrambling to test mics and screens. Elena was wiping down chairs when Todd, a mid-level manager with a loud voice and a cheap suit, stormed in. What are you doing? He barked, his face red. Don't touch the AV gear. One screw-up and your contract's gone. Employees nearby froze, a junior linguist whispering, She's toast. Elena's hands clenched the rag, her face calm. She bowed slightly, her ponytail bobbing, and said, My apologies. She resumed wiping, her movements slow. Todd strutted out, muttering, Stick to trash. Elena's glasses fogged briefly, but she kept working, the rag's rhythm steady. In the executive lounge, Elena was polishing a coffee table when a senior strategist named Lila with a silk scarf and a condescending smirk leaned over. You're in my space, she said loud enough for nearby analysts to hear. She tossed a used tissue onto Elena's tray, laughing. Bet you're used to cleaning up after better people, she added, her team snickering. Elena's hands paused, her glasses slipping, but she nodded. She picked up the tissue, dropped it into the bin, and said, "Better people don't litter." Lila's scarf fluttered, her smirk fading as Elena resumed polishing the table, gleaming. A translator named Khalid, who'd observed the summit prep, approached her in the hallway holding a small, worn photo. "Found this in the old training files," he said, his voice low. It was a picture of Elena at a Gulf diplomatic event, standing beside dignitaries, her headset poised. Elena's fingers brushed the photo, her eyes softened, a quiet strength in her stance. She nodded, slipped it into her bag, and said, "Thank you." Khalid smiled, walked away, but a nearby linguist overheard her notepad pausing as she whispered about the cleaner with a regal past. In the copy room, Elena was restocking paper when a translator named Vanessa with glossy lips and a cruel edge leaned in. "Heard you played hero with the delegates," she said, her voice loud. She knocked over a stack of paper, laughing at it as it scattered. "Don't get cocky, cleaner." Her friend colleague, a guy with a tech badge, smirked. "Bet she practiced that Arabic on YouTube," he said, his voice carrying. Elena's hands shook as she knelt to gather the paper, her glasses slipping. She looked at Vanessa. "Your mess, your shame," she said, her voice sharp. Vanessa's laugh stopped the room quiet as Elena stood, her ponytail neat. During a coffee break in the kitchen, a risk analyst named Lauren with a sharp bob and a condescending smirk spotted Elena refilling napkins. "Hey, janitor, you're in the way," Lauren said, loud enough to halt conversations. She grabbed Elena's tote bag and tossed it onto the floor, spilling a small keychain engraved with E and A forever. "Keep your junk out of our space," Lauren added, her colleagues laughing. Elena's hands froze, her glasses fogging, but she knelt to retrieve the keychain, her face calm. "Keep your hands to yourself," she said, her voice cutting. Lauren's smirk wavered and the kitchen went silent as Elena stood, keychain in hand, and walked away, her sneakers steady. In the library archive, a researcher named Aisha with a stack of journals handed Elena a small faded folder as she dusted shelves. "This was misfiled," Aisha said, her voice soft. Inside was a report from a Gulf Trade Summit crediting Elena Hartwell for drafting key terms. Elena's fingers traced the pages, her eyes flickering with pride. She nodded, slipping it into her bag. "Thank you," she said, her voice firm. Aisha smiled, returning to her work, but a nearby clerk overheard his laptop pausing as he texted about the janitor with a trade legacy. In the cafeteria during lunch, a group of linguists gathered at a table, their voices sharp. "She's just a cleaner with a fluke," a woman with a gold watch said, sipping her smoothie. "Probably faked that Arabic," her friend, a guy in a polo shirt, added, loud enough for Elena to hear as she wiped down tables nearby. Elena's hands paused on the rag, her ponytail swaying. She set the rag down, looked at the woman, and said, "Your doubts don't change my words." The gold watch woman's smoothie straw froze the polo guy's laugh, dying as Elena walked away, her cart rattling softly. The $80 million summit was underway when the interpretation system crashed, screens flickering, headsets silent. The main interpreter was stuck in traffic and panic gripped the room. Delegates shifted their faces tight. CEO Adrian Layton, tall and calm in a dark suit, scanned the chaos, his jaw clenched. Elena stepped forward, her cart abandoned, and met his gaze. "I can handle it," she said, her voice steady. She took a headset, her hands precise, and began interpreting English to Arabic, Arabic to French, French to English. Her words were seamless, carrying nuance and diplomacy, easing tensions. The delegates nodded, signing the preliminary agreement. Adrian's eyes followed her, his pen frozen mid-note. In the file room, a records clerk named Anita with a soft voice and a stack of folders handed Elena a faded envelope as she organized documents. "This was misfiled," Anita said, her eyes kind. Inside was a letter from a Gulf embassy thanking Elena Hartwell, royal liaison, for mediating a trade agreement. Elena's fingers traced the letter, her eyes softening, a quiet pride in her posture. She nodded, slipping it into her tote bag. "Thank you," she said, her voice firm. Anita smiled, returning to her work, but a nearby clerk overheard his pen pausing as he whispered to a colleague about the cleaner with a high-stakes past. In the cafeteria after the summit, whispers spread like wildfire. A group of analysts clustered at a table, their voices sharp. "She got lucky," a woman with a diamond bracelet said, twirling her fork. "Probably bribed someone for that gig." Her friend, a guy in a tailored vest, laughed. "Royal." "Nah, she's a fraud," he said, loud enough for Elena to hear as she cleared trays nearby. Elena's hands paused, her ponytail swaying. She set a tray down, looked at the woman and said, "Facts don't need your approval." The bracelet woman's fork froze the vest guy's laugh, dying as Elena walked away, her cart rattling. In the parking lot after hours, Elena was collecting litter when a finance analyst named Brett with a loud voice and a sports car pulled up. "Hey, mop lady," he shouted, tossing a fast food wrapper at her feet. "Clean that up, will ya?" His friends in the car laughed, one filming. "Bet she's used to scraps," a woman with a designer scarf said. Elena's hands clenched the trash bag, her glasses fogging. She picked up the wrapper, dropped it into the bin and said, "Your litter matches your soul." Brett's engine revved, his laugh faltering as Elena resumed her work, the night air cool against her uniform. A senior linguist named Omar, who'd watched the summit, approached Elena in the mailroom holding a small leather-bound notebook. "Found this in the archives," he said, his voice low. It was Elena's notes from a UN translation workshop filled with diplomatic phrasing tips. Elena's fingers traced the pages, her eyes flickering with pride. She nodded, slipping it into her pocket. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. Omar smiled, walking away, but a nearby clerk overheard his pen pausing as he texted about the janitor with a global past. In the break room, Elena was refilling the coffee machine when Nate, the junior translator, leaned in again. "Heard you're the talk of the office," he said, his voice dripping sarcasm. "Don't let it go to your head, mop girl." He tossed his empty coffee cup onto her cart, the lid popping off, splashing her uniform. His friends laughed, one recording on their phone. Elena's hands shook as she grabbed a rag, her glasses fogging. She wiped the cart, looked at Nate and said, "Your trash reflects you." Nate's smartwatch beeped, his grin faltering as Elena pushed her cart out, the coffee stain dark on her sleeve. During the summit setup, a catering supervisor named Tara with a tight bun and a sharp tone saw Elena adjusting tablecloths in the conference room. "You're not banquet staff," Tara snapped loud enough for the crew to hear. She grabbed Elena's cleaning rag and tossed it into a trash bin, laughing. "Stay out of my event cleaner," she added, her crew chuckling. Elena's hands clenched, her glasses catching the light, but she retrieved the rag, her face calm. "Your attitude's the real trash," she said, her voice low. Tara's bun tightened, the crew's laughter fading as Elena resumed her work rag in hand. In the translation booth, a tech assistant named Marcus with a nervous grin and a stack of cables approached Elena as she cleaned the glass panels. "This fell out of a drawer," he said, handing her a small, worn photo. It was Elena at a golf charity gala, standing beside a royal figure, her dress simple but regal. Elena's fingers brushed the photo, her eyes softening, a quiet resolve in her posture. She nodded, slipping it into her pocket. "Thank you," she said, her voice firm. Marcus shuffled away, but a nearby linguist overheard her headset pausing as she whispered about the cleaner with a royal past. In the office gym, Elena was wiping down equipment when a HR rep named Sophia with a sleek ponytail and a loud laugh walked in. "Cleaner, you're blocking the treadmill," she said, her voice carrying to the other gym users. She tossed her water bottle onto Elena's cart, splashing her uniform. "Stick to the locker rooms," Sophia added, her colleagues snickering. Elena's hands shook as she grabbed a rag, her glasses fogging. She wiped the cart, looked at Sophia and said, "Your spill doesn't move me." Sophia's ponytail flicked, her laugh fading as Elena resumed her work. The gym's hum steady. Adrian called Elena to the translation suite that evening, the room quiet except for the server's hum. He leaned against a desk, his jacket off, his eyes sharp. "Who are you really?" he asked, his voice low. Elena reached into her backpack, her hands steady, and pulled out a diplomatic ID. The seal gleamed. Princess Elena Binti Hartwell Al Farouk, a hidden Gulf royal, living incognito. Adrian's breath caught his pen dropping. Elena's face stayed calm, her glasses glinting. "I chose this life," she said, her voice soft. "To listen, to learn." Adrian nodded, respect in his eyes. She zipped her backpack, walked out, her sneakers soft. In the lobby the next day, Elena was polishing a brass railing when Rachel, the marketing exec, passed by. "Still here?" Rachel said, her voice loud. "Thought you'd be fired after that stunt." She tossed a crumpled napkin at Elena's cart, her handbag swinging. Her colleague, a man with cufflinks, laughed. "Bet she's dreaming of a corner office," he said, his voice carrying. Elena's hands clenched the rag, her face calm. She picked up the napkin, dropped it into the bin, and said, "Your dreams are smaller." Rachel's handbag slipped, her laugh gone as Elena resumed polishing, her movement steady. A translator named Sanjay, who'd been silent during the summit, approached Elena in the hallway holding a small dog-eared journal. "This was in the executive archives," he said, his voice low. It was Elena's notes from a Gulf leadership seminar filled with insights on cultural diplomacy. Elena's fingers brushed the pages, her eyes softening a quiet strength in her posture. She nodded, slipping it into her tote bag. "Thank you," she said, her voice firm. Sanjay smiled, walking away, but a nearby analyst overheard her eyes widening as she whispered to a colleague about the cleaner who'd shaped global talks. In the copy room, Vanessa leaned in again, her glossy lips curled. "Heard you're some kind of princess," she said, her voice loud. "Nice scam, janitor." She knocked over Elena's cleaning supplies, the bottles clattering. Her friend, the tech badge guy, smirked. "Bet she faked that ID," he said, his voice carrying. Elena's hands shook as she gathered the bottles, her glasses slipping. She looked at Vanessa. "Your lies don't change truth," she said, her voice sharp. Vanessa's smirk faded, the room quiet as Elena stood, her ponytail neat. In the boardroom's storage closet, Elena was organizing supplies when a junior exec named Ethan with a loud tie and a smug grin leaned in. "Cleaner, you're cluttering my space," he said loud enough for nearby staff to hear. He knocked over a stack of folders, papers scattering across the floor. "Stick to brooms," he added, his colleagues chuckling. Elena's hands clenched the shelf, her glasses fogging. She gathered the papers, looked at Ethan and said, "Your mess doesn't define me." Ethan's tie seemed louder, his grin fading as Elena resumed her work, the folders neatly stacked. A leadership meeting was held to discuss bonuses, and Elena approached the boardroom, her uniform clean despite the stains. Becca, a junior assistant with a nervous smile, blocked the door. "Sorry, execs only," she said, her voice loud. Staff level." Employees nearby smirked, one muttering, "Back to the mop." Elena's hands clasped her face calm. She nodded, turned, and started wiping a window, her rag steady. Becca's clipboard trembled, her smile faltering as Elena's silence filled the hall. Adrian appeared behind her, his suit crisp, his presence heavy. He opened the boardroom door, his voice clear. "This is Elena, royal advisor to a Gulf monarchy and Linguaro's newest shareholder." The room froze, pens dropping, gasps echoing. Claire choked on her water, Vanessa's coffee cup shaking. Adrian turned to Elena, his eyes warm. "Help me lead this company. Together." Elena nodded, her ponytail glinting, and stepped inside, her sneakers soft. The silence was deafening. The fallout hit hard. Claire was demoted, her projects reassigned after her taunts went viral on Slack. Vanessa's contract ended her, LinkedIn flooded with her gossip screenshots. The tech badge guy was suspended, his expenses flagged. Becca was moved to data entry, her clipboard gone. It wasn't dramatic, just reality, steady and relentless. Elena didn't gloat, didn't comment. She swapped her uniform for a simple blazer, her cleaning cart retired. In the cafeteria, a group of linguists whispered by the coffee machine. "Claire's done," a woman with hoop earrings said, stirring her latte. "Her career's toast." Her friend, a guy with a smartwatch, nodded. "Vanessa's consulting," now he said, air quoting. They laughed, but their eyes darted to Elena, clearing her tray nearby. She didn't look up, just walked out, her tote bag light. The hoop earring woman paused, muttering, "She's got more grace than they ever did." Elena and Adrian worked side by side, tackling global initiatives. One evening, he handed her a photo from his desk, her mid-summit interpreting with precision. "You changed us," he said, his voice soft. Elena touched the photo, her glasses glinting, and nodded. Late nights in the translation suite turned into shared glances, then something deeper. She didn't flaunt it. Her work, her presence was enough. In the break room, a new hire named Lila with a nervous laugh approached Elena. "You're why I'm here," she said, her voice low. Elena nodded, her blazer simple, and said, "Keep listening." Lila's laugh steadied her posture straighter as Elena walked away, her ponytail neat. At a Geneva summit, Elena stepped onto the stage, her blazer modest, her glasses polished. Adrian walked beside her, his suit sharp. The room, diplomats, CEOs, linguists watched as she spoke, weaving English, Arabic, and French into a call for unity. The crowd stood applauding. Elena nodded, her hand light on Adrian's arm, her power quiet but fierce. Linguaro transformed. New contracts flooded in Asia, Europe, Africa. Elena's name echoed in boardrooms, her story in training manuals. A lobby mural bore her quote, "Listen before you speak." Employees touched it for luck, their fingers tracing the words. Elena didn't stop to look. Her work was her legacy. Sometimes Elena stood by the office window, the city's lights stretching out. Her ponytail caught in the moonlight. Her glasses glinted, her hands on the sill. She'd been invisible, mocked, but she'd stood firm. and she was still here, whole and unshaken. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.